first time I hear some of these stories, I lose my ever-loving mind a little bit. You know what? Speaking of which, let's talk about that, because Monday here in Canada, we celebrated Remembrance Day. And it's a big deal for us, right? Like, so it's a federal holiday. And I don't think it's not a statutory holiday where everything is closed, but like all the government buildings, schools, all that kind of stuff, all those things are closed, excuse me. And about 10:30, many of us, many people go out to the Remembrance Day services wherever they may be found. So sometimes you see them at community halls, sometimes you'll see them at fire departments, sometimes you'll see them at, maybe there's a cenotaph in a park, or sometimes it's just in the public park. Sometimes it's at a war memorial. Whatever it happens to be, we seem to gravitate and find our way to one of these Remembrance Day services, regardless of the weather. I mean, as a kid, I remember going in the rain. I remember going in the snow. I remember going in when it's nice. As an adult now, with the way climate's changing, this was the first, this past Monday, it was just pouring rain and windy. But last year, it was sunny and hot and kind of humid. So it doesn't really matter the condition. It doesn't really matter the context. You go. And we wear our poppies. And at the end of the Remembrance Day celebration, we go up and we put our poppies on, usually there's some wreaths that have been laid. We go up and we put our poppies on those wreaths that have been laid as another expression of thanks for those who have served. And we think about the people who served in the First World War, the Second World War, Korea. We think about the people here in Canada that served in the peacekeepers, wherever they may have been found, and the folks that served in Afghanistan. It's a big deal for us. It is genuinely, it's a time where you see a lot of love for country and for service and for those who served. It's really quite neat. It almost always brings a tear to my eye. It almost always gets me choked up, when we say in Flanders Fields or even this year singing the national anthem, it kind of ripped me apart a little bit. Anyhow, on that hellscape known as X, one of our federal politicians, he's actually the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. His name is Pierre Poilievre. That's him. That's Pierre Poilievre. He's an MP, a member of Parliament, and he's the leader of the opposition. So here in Canada, our Prime Minister is Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has a minority government, which means they have less than 50% of the vote, less than 50% of the seats. Pierre Poilievre's party, the Conservative Party of Canada, they have the second most seats. So he's the leader of the opposition. And I'm going to read something to you, and you can tell me if it sounds familiar, all right? This is what he posted on X. Contrary to what Liberals claimed last year, chaplains are banned from prayers at Remembrance Day ceremonies. Canadians should be free to practice their faith alongside fellow Canadians as we commemorate those who made the ultimate sacrifices for our freedoms. Common sense, not woke nonsense. Now, in it, he posts a link to an article in a right-wing publication called the Epic Times. But does this sound familiar? So this is a Canadian politician posting this stuff. Common sense, not woke nonsense. Canadians should be free, alluding to the idea that Canadians aren't free. Chaplains are banned from prayers at Remembrance Day. So I understand the premise that I understand what he's trying to do. My fear is that others won't. See, within this statement of his are lies. He's lying. And, I get it. He got it from the Epic Times. Epic Times told him this. But he's the leader of the opposition party of Canada. He's a member of Parliament. I don't think he's ever had a job outside of Parliament Hill. I believe, like his entire adult life, he's worked on Parliament Hill in one capacity or another. He knows where to go to get the information that would tell him. And if he went to the Government of Canada website, there's literally a page that talks about how chaplains should proceed. And this is for public consumption. It's out there for everyone to see. And what it says is chaplains should be careful. Many people will pray. Not everybody prays in the same way. So please be sensitive to how others pray. It doesn't say they can't pray. By no stretch. It just says be mindful of who's in front of you. Be mindful of the people you're taking care of. And for what it's worth, this Remembrance Day service that I went to was beautifully filled with prayer and with spirituality. It was amazing. It was gorgeous. And it was conducted by a military chaplain. So there's no ban. There's no ban on prayer, despite what this fella says. And there's no woke nonsense at work here. Canadians are free to pray as they like. Those chaplains were free to pray as they like. They were just simply asked, be sensitive to the needs of the community who's going to be in front of you. That's it. This really bothered me. When I first read this, when I first stumbled across it on Twitter, it really annoyed me because this form of identity politics, the left are coming for your freedoms, the left are coming for your rights, the left are coming for your privileges, the left are coming for your prayers, and to do it on a day where so many Canadians already feel so much emotion. And we do. It's an interesting and lovely and beautiful thing. All of us feel this emotion, and he played that emotion. He literally played on that emotion. He told lies in order to demonize a group of the country. The Liberals, the woke, the left. That post of his was about, I'm going to create division amongst the Canadians for my political objective, for my political goals. I'm going to create, foster, nurture division amongst Canadians so that I can become the next prime minister. And in all fairness, he's leading in the polls. He may indeed become the next prime minister. I'm very thankful for this thing we call a minority government. Maybe he gets a majority, maybe he gets a minority, I don't know. But a tweet like that is out of line. Right? As I was thinking about it, when we do these kinds of things, when we say these kinds of things, and for what it's worth, we just went through an election cycle in the U.S. where people were demonized. We went through an election cycle in the U.S. where division was fostered, where people were told, be afraid of the left, be afraid of the left, be afraid of the left. Now, listen, I understand that, it was true, probably true for the left as well. They were saying, be afraid of Trump. But the difference is these were actually things that Trump was saying that we were saying we should be afraid of that kind of language. When someone speaks like a fascist, when someone acts like a fascist, they are often, right? Polyev did here. He wasn't tweeting about anything that Trudeau had said. He wasn't tweeting about an actual government policy that he easily could have researched. He tweeted lies. He tweeted lies that he believes will benefit him. And if you go and you read his actual post and you read the number of people who tweeted after him, who commented after him, it worked. A lot of people real angry at Liberals because they banned prayer on Remembrance Day. Just a little aside. If you're ever wondering why I speak about American politics, and I've described it to you, I've described why several times. This is why. What happens south of us comes to us. Those tactics, that strategy, those actions, that language comes north. We watch you. That worked. Boom. And we do it. Creating division isn't something any of us should seek. That isn't to say that we should always be okay that that there isn't unity. That isn't to say that we need to be upset that there isn't unity, right? Sometimes division is naturally created. When you say something hateful, when you say something intolerant, doesn't mean it should be tolerated. Just because you can think it, just because you can say it, doesn't mean we should embrace it and say, oh, well, yeah, to each their own. No. I should never hate you for it, but I don't need to be around you. If I know you to be a bigot, I don't need to be around you. If I know you to be a racist, I don't need to be around you. If I know you to be a misogynist, I don't need to be around you. That division that's created between you and I is because you have different interests than I do. And I don't need to spend time with somebody who's in that role. Again, doesn't mean I should hate you. And it doesn't mean I should see you as an enemy. It just means that I'm not crossing over to meet you where you are. I'll always offer you a hand, and I will always offer you a bridge where you can cross to meet me. But don't expect me to come and meet you where you are in your intolerance. So there's always going to be natural, almost organic division. Okay? But we shouldn't be creating it out of nothing. We shouldn't be manufacturing outrage with our lies. We should not. And again, I would argue, I think in this case, I would say what he's trying to do is he's trying to demonize a large percentage of the population. He's trying to create enemies. He's trying to show people that, hey, you got an enemy over there. They don't just think differently than you do. They're an enemy. They're trying to take away from you. They're trying to steal you from you. They're trying to rob you. That's an enemy. That's not Jesus's way. And, again, I often don't get involved, except this guy's bringing up prayer. If he's bringing up prayer, he's bringing up faith. And if he's bringing up faith, he's bringing up Jesus. And if he's bringing up Jesus, he needs to know what Jesus has actually said about this kind of thing. Jesus teaches us not to see others as enemies. Whereas Poilievre's telling us to be afraid of our neighbors, Jesus is saying you should never see your neighbor as your enemy. You should, as a matter of fact, you should work diligently to not see anyone as an enemy. Jesus tells us to grow closer to our enemies, to love our enemies, to pray for our enemies, to provide for our enemies. Again, not necessarily not at all joining them, but loving them and taking care of them like we would take care of anybody else. Ultimately, Jesus tells us that our neighbor is everyone, and therefore, Jesus tells us that your enemies are your neighbors. And in a tweet like this, what Poilievre is saying is your neighbors are your enemies. It's running counter. It's running counter to Jesus. It's running counter to the gospel. It's running counter to a message of love. It's running counter to a message of faith. It runs counter to, I would argue, it runs counter to anyone of faith who would pray. In Jesus' name, I have no enemies, only neighbors. Yeah, I understand that there's differences, that we'll have differences of opinions, and I may not ever find myself, going over into their ideologies and into their understandings. As a matter of fact, I won't. If their understandings are about bigotry and hatred, I won't. If their understandings are about creating divisions and lying to create outrage, I won't ever. But a difference of opinion doesn't mean that I need to see you as an enemy. A difference of opinion doesn't mean I need to see you as someone to be reviled. You're just a person, another person that I'm supposed to love. Creating outrage out of lies for political gain. Creating outrage out of lies for personal gain. Creating outrage out of lies to foster division amongst people are not the qualities of a Christian leader. And we must make sure, and again, I know somebody's going to, without fail, somebody will say, well, you do it all the time. Maybe. In which case, I need to check that. Whenever we find ourselves walking that edge, we need to make sure we're on the right side of things. We need to, and by that, I think what I mean is just no. There's enough division out there that comes naturally with thinking people or with unthinking people. There's enough division out there that comes naturally with opinions, because everybody has one, like other things. There's enough division that just springs up organically because we are who we are and we are all unique. We do not need to be creating it. We don't need to be looking for new ways to be divided. And we certainly don't need to be bearing false witness in order to create it. Amen.